We have Elce Redmond here with us this evening. Elce is a community organizer and trainer here on Chicago's west side in the Austin neighborhood. And for the past 25 years, he has been working with community groups throughout Chicago, in the nation, and around the world on issues such as living wage, displacement of public housing residents, an end to the war in Iraq, equal access and disability rights, healthcare, human rights, and more. Internationally, Elce has conducted leadership development and political education projects in Ireland, Argentina, and East Timor, organized against child slave labor in Côte d'Ivoire, and advocated for Palestinian rights in Israel-Palestine. He also led an election monitoring program in Bosnia-Herzegovina and conducted trainings on sexual violence on behalf of the Roma population in Budapest, Hungary. In 2005, he traveled to Baghdad with Christian Peacemaker teams to advocate and organize on behalf of detainees in Iraq. Currently, Elce is on the Executive Committee of Chicago Jobs with Justice and is the organizing director for the South Austin Coalition. He is working on a campaign to spark banking reform and organizing efforts to pressure the U.S. government to adopt a national jobs program. He also organizes the unemployed and mobilizes low-income people to fight to maintain and improve social safety net programs. Elce, we're really happy to have you here this evening with us. Thank you so much.
I want to thank each and every one of you for those wonderful applause. And I also want to congratulate CPT on 25 years of getting it away. It's a remarkable organization with remarkable people, and I am proud to have been involved with them both in Iraq and Israel-Palestine, and hope to be involved with them for the remainder of the time that I have on this earth. So I want to thank you guys very much. So here's what I have, right? Now, keeping in the tradition of what Sylvia was talking about in terms of telling stories, what I would like to do in my presentation is I got this formal sort of presentation, and then I have stories. So what I want to do is I'm going to have a little formal stuff, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to have a story. Right? And so the stories will talk about what we're doing on the west side, what we're trying to do not only on the west side, but all across the city and hopefully across the nation, in trying to reduce the violence that exists within our communities and stuff. Our communities are suffering through an amalgam of violence, whether it's like physical violence or verbal violence or violence against each other. So what I'm going to do is formal story. All right? So what I wanted to first to do was to thank Tim and Chris and all the folks of the planning committee who helped pull this event together. It's wonderful sort of to be here and to be in this sort of group of people. I don't know a lot of you, but hopefully during these next 4 days we all get to know each other a little better and hopefully to work closely with each other. All right? And I need not pause to say how very delighted I am here to be here tonight and have the opportunity to be a little part of this very significant gathering. Now, the 25th anniversary of the Christian Peacemaker Team sort of epitomizes the quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, that human salvation lies in the hands of the creatively maladjusted. And I think that's a quote that really epitomizes CPT, all right? Because CPT has been called upon to be maladjusted against the violence and discrimination. They have been maladjusted against war and militarism. Excuse me, can't even say the freaking word. Okay, it's so bad, all right? And the tragic effects of economic destruction. So when I first met CPT back in 2005, I met Claire. Right? And when I first met Claire, if you meet Claire, she's a very unassuming individual. seems modest. She seems very humble person. But as I got to know Claire, we were in Iraq together, all right? That all sort of changed. I mean, Claire was still humble. Claire was still unassuming. But, Claire had a fire for social justice. Claire had a fire against the evils that were happening within Iraq itself. And this quiet, unassuming person was leading us in our delegation in Iraq. And there were meetings that we were at that, Claire was there. Claire was moving the issues forward. And I think that, in terms of being maladjusted, Claire was incredibly maladjusted during that period of time. But I remember Beth. Beth was in Iraq with us as well. Right? And, well, you can't say that Beth is unassuming or modest, but she had that same fire and desire for social justice. Because we heard the stories of the Iraqi people. Right? We saw the conditions that the Iraqi people were living in. We saw the oppression that was around them. And yet, even through that, we still sort of came together and said that something must be changed. And at that point, we were all maladjusted. So when I was looking over this quote, I thought that this really sort of epitomizes CPT. That it is maladjusted. It is maladjusted against evil. It's maladjusted against oppression. It's maladjusted against injustice. And that's what an organization that this is. And that's why I'm very, very proud to be a part of it. Right? I have watched as CPT members have launched themselves inside the belly of the beast to nonviolently resist injustice around the world. And that's a rare for individuals who believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that they must stand up and do something about it. And in our society today, we honor people who have gone to the military and have killed individuals in the name of our flag. But yet people who have laid their lives down for injustice and have done it nonviolently, many times those individuals are not remembered or are not rewarded or are not given parades. But they understand that what's important is that we must all stand against injustice. And some of us may not make it through that long struggle and that long journey, but it's imperative that we make that journey itself. And that's what is important about CPT, and that's why I love this organization so much. And I love all the people who are a part of it as well. And I remember back in 2005 when I met Tom Fox. And you know what? Tom was sort of similar to Claire. You know what? Very unassuming. A person who said very little. But when he did say something, you understood that it was very, very important and it was very powerful itself. And I remember when I met Tom, he was telling me about what CPT was doing in Israel-Palestine. And he said, you know what? If you ever get an opportunity, you need to go there as well and find out what CPT is doing and the conditions that the Palestinian people are suffering under. And I remember that as our last conversation that we had during dinner in Baghdad. So I decided, well, you know, in 2006, well, I'm going to go to Israel, Palestine. And I contacted Claire, and Claire said, yes, we really need folks to come. And in that experience in Israel, Palestine, one of the things that we were doing was school patrol. And I remember when we got up in the morning and people said, okay, this is what we're going to do today. All right, we're going to go on school patrol. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. We go on school patrol. What are we going to do on the school patrol? And what's happening that we need to get up early in the morning to go on school patrol? And what happened was within the school patrol, it was myself and it was a couple of other of our brothers and sisters. And what we were doing is we were assisting the Palestinian kids to go to school. Now, in the United States of America, you think, okay, all right, we have to assist kids to go to school. And what was happening in Israel-Palestine was that the young people, as they were going to school, were being harassed by the settlers. And it was remarkable that in our day and age, young children who want to get an education are prevented from getting an education based solely on who they are. Now, that should be criminal in any society whatsoever. Right? And what that made me think of doing this sort of school patrol and trying to get kids back and forth to school is when I got back to Chicago, Illinois, I was at a local school. And when I was at the school, there was young people who were running to the school because they were being attacked by other young people. And then the issue came up, and I talked to the principal of the school about this, because I told him, hey, you know what? I just came back from Israel-Palestine. And one of the issues there was that, a lot of the Palestinian kids were being harassed and attacked as they were trying to get from their home to the school. And then I told him that, well, you know what? Even though this is Chicago, Illinois, we have young people who are being harassed and attacked as they're trying to get to the school. So it became very apparent that something had to be done about this issue. So I met with some parents. I met with some officials of Chicago Public Schools. I met with the principal and his staff. Right? And I said, well, what's going on? What's happening here at this school? And they went and said, things here aren't very good. We have massive amounts of fights. We have young people who are bringing weapons to the school. We have young people who, for whatever reasons, can't get along with each other. And what happens is they bring that violence into the school. And then when they get out of school, that violence sort of spreads throughout the neighborhood itself. Right? So after we all got together, we sort of decided that something needed to be done. And I said I wanted to do something totally different than what we had done before. And what usually happens with the Chicago public school system is that they say if there's a problem, what we're going to do is we're going to have more security. Right? And we're going to saturate the school with security. And we're going to have people there every day. All right? If anybody gets out of line, we're going to lock them up, throw them in jail, and forget about it. And I thought, well, listen, that does not work. And what we do not want to do is criminalize our children. Once we begin criminalizing our children, what we see is they have this downward spiral and they become a part of the criminal justice system. And once they are part of that criminal justice system, they will never, ever, hardly ever get from under that. So it became very important that we don't do that. So what I did is, I thought about my experience with CPT in Israel-Palestine, right? And I brought in this sort of little paragraph, right? And I want to read this sort of little paragraph that I gave to the Chicago Public Schools, that I gave to the principal of the school, and I gave to the parents of the children, right? That the international model of nonviolent intervention in conflict zones has made enormous strides in the past few decades in the advancement of a philosophy that unarmed civilians trained in the principles of social action and the concept of protective accompaniment can prevent the outbreak of violence. And I gave them examples of what CPT had did all across the world. I gave them examples of groups like the International Peace Brigade. I gave them examples of groups like the Nonviolent Peace Force. I gave them examples of how unarmed civilians who embrace a principle and a philosophy of nonviolent resistance to violence, that they can make incredible changes. So what I tried to do was, how do we duplicate this model, this international model, on a local community? And first, there are people who are saying, well, you know what, this cannot happen here in the city of Chicago. This cannot happen on the west side of Chicago, right? Our gangs are too bad. Our kids are too bad. There is no way that you could ever affect change in this community, because violence is inherent in each and every one of us. That was someone said. This was a minister who told me this, that violence is inherent in each and every one of us. Okay? And I said, let's look at this international model of nonviolent resistance. How do we utilize this model on a local level? So what we did is, we formed what was called the Austin Peace Force. Now the Peace Force was composed, it was multiracial, multicultural, intergenerational group of both parents, community volunteers, religious leaders. What we looked at was the model that groups like CPT had created, the model that groups like International Peace Brigades had created. And I went back into history, all right? Since I was with a lot of educators, I said, okay, you know what, you guys know history. And you know what, Gandhi and the whole sort of Shanti Shina, this sort of peace army. And I was telling them what we need to build in our communities is a peace army. An army composed of individual citizens who are banded together to remove and prevent violence in our communities. So our initial group that we had about 14 people, right? We put them through like 6 weeks of training, self-defense. And the reason why we had 6 weeks of training was, we wanted to make sure that people were doing it for the right reasons. I had told any and everyone who was going to be a part of this that we are not security. Right? We're not security guards. Right? Our job is not to beat up the young people. Right? Our job is not to belittle the young people, saying that, you don't understand history. Why are you doing this? That's not our jobs. Right? Our jobs are to be peacemakers. Right? And the way to be peacemakers is you must set an example as a peacemaker. So we had about 14 people. We had 6 weeks of training. Right? There are some people who I thought got the concept, who understood this sort of philosophy, but there are many who really didn't get the concept. Right? Now, what we did is we started off at 2 schools. Now, in the Austin community, you have May Elementary School and you have Michelle Clark High School. Right? Now, pretty much they're only a block away from each other. And what was happening was the elementary school kids will go over and fight the high school kids, and the high school kids will come and fight the elementary school kids. Well, that created some incredible problems, guys. I must admit, incredible problems. But what we did is we started creating this peace force, and we had people out there on a day-to-day basis. Okay? And a lot of times in the beginning when we started, we broke up I don't know how many fights. Many of those fights, myself, I'm not a really big person, but it was important for certain fights that we needed to get in the middle of those fights to prevent them from escalating. And that's what we did. Many of us did. And that first sort of 3 to 4 months of building this sort of peace force, I thought was incredibly difficult. And there were times when I thought, what the heck am I doing? And there were some of our members of our peace force who became very discouraged because they had this impression that all the young people wanted to do was to fight and kill each other. And I thought and others thought that, there has to be a level of hope for the future that all of us must have. That even though this is an incredible, difficult issue, that we must still strive. So that's what we did. Right? The first 3 or 4 months was absolutely difficult. And this was around 2007, 2008. Very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. We lost some of our members of our peace force because they could not deal with the anxiety that was occurring. Because every day there were fights. And it wasn't just one fight, guys. I mean, it was 1 fight here, 2 fights there, 3 fights there, 4 fights there. So the situation became sometimes very chaotic. But we persevered. And one of the things why we persevered is that we were there day to day to day to day to day. As you look at CPT's work in Israel-Palestine or Iraq or Colombia, they're there on a day-to-day basis. They have a routine, and they stick to that routine. They stick to those principles. They stick to that philosophy of nonviolent intervention. So I want to do the exact same thing. I couldn't say, okay, we're going to give up now. All right? That, you know what, the mob will rule. So we felt that we should not allow the mob to rule. Because what we found out, as I talked to some young people, they really did not all want to fight. All of them did not want to fight. But based on their peer pressure, based on their neighborhood, based on their surrounding environments, they felt that this was the only way that we could resolve conflicts. Boom, then a light went on in our heads. All right, so we got to do something about how do we resolve conflicts before they end up in fights. And that's what we did. We went inside of the elementary school, we went inside of the high school, and we had sort of conflict resolution classes going on. And how do kids get to resolve a conflict before it ends up in violence. I got really lucky, and we had some money from this sort of after-school program. Okay? And what I wanted to do was to use that money to build a peace brigade, but a youth peace brigade. So we got lucky and hired about 23 young people. They ranged from the ages of 13 to 19 years old. We broke them into groups. We trained them in conflict resolution. We trained them in sort of nonviolent intervention. And we put them out there and said, okay, you got this training. What are you guys going to do with it? Right? So I want to tell a story. It was during the spring break, all right? And if any of you are from Chicago or any sort of neighborhood, spring break, when spring break comes, this is an opportunity for all the young people to get rid of their grudges. Right? So you have an opportunity to take your grudge off on this person who's your enemy. So what had happened was that we had heard that there was going to be this massive sort of fight that was going to happen. That there are going to be kids from different areas of the city coming to our area to fight a bunch of other kids. Now, a lot of times we never understood what was the real reason for it. It was either he said, she said, or he said something about me on Facebook or whatever. But we got this wind and there was going to be this massive fight. Right? And, of course, what the police were going to do is they're going to come out there in force. And what my experience has been in doing this kind of work is whenever the police come out in force, what that does is it makes the situation worse. Because people are already on a heightened sense of paranoia. And what the police usually do is, they're not very good in terms of dealing with young people at all. There should be some sort of work that can be done so that the police can really sort of deal and talk to young people. But what we did is, I met with our peace brigade. And, of course, they knew what was happening. They knew who was coming, where they were coming from, the reasons why they were coming, what kind of weapons they had, where they had the weapons hidden. They knew all this stuff. Okay? What I wanted them to do was not to tell me who was doing what. All right? What I wanted them to do was ask them this one question. What are you guys going to do to prevent this? Because they saw that this was going to be the fight of all fights. Now, when young people say that this is going to be one big bang up thing, you sort of realize that it's going to be big. What happened was, what was successful about it is that our Peace Brigade went into the crowds of the people before they were gathering, right? And convinced them, well, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that, we should do this later, we should do this later, we should do this. And what was successful about that was that, the big brawl did not happen. I was really happy about that, okay? The big brawl did not happen. And I really was trying to tell the principal, I was trying to tell some of the community leaders that what was important was that the young people themselves were the ones who stopped this massive riot. Because I must admit to you all today that I have been on the west side of Chicago, and there's been young people fighting with bats and sticks and everything. All right? And the police are right there, and those kids could care less about the police. So I knew that, the police presence in that community was not going to stop this riot. It was not going to stop this riot. And there have been many situations where, the police have not been very useful in stopping these kind of fights. Once the kids want to do this, they will do it, and whatever you're going to do is not going to stop them. But what happened was that our Peace Brigade were the ones who prevented this sort of large riot. And I was very happy about that. Right? But that's not the end of the story itself. What I am going to be talking about in my sort of a longer workshop is that what we need to do is to build these multicultural, multiracial peace forces throughout all of our communities. And that we can do that with committed people who are committed to the principles and the philosophy of nonviolence, who are committed to the principles and philosophies of social action, who are committed to the principles and the philosophy that unless we do something about the violence in our communities itself, that we are going down the road of a very bleak society. And I appeal to each and every one of you as people of good faith that not only can we prevent violence in Colombia or Iraq or Israel, Palestine, that we can prevent violence here in Evanston, we can prevent violence on the west side of Chicago, we can prevent violence throughout this city. But what we need is an army of people committed to justice. We need an army of people who are committed to social action. And I think we can do this. And I look at what we've done in Austin itself. Honestly, it is not perfect. There are people who come in, there are people who come out. There are some people who cannot deal with just being a part of a group like this, primarily because if you're working with young people, sometimes young people say some incredibly foul things to adults. I had a kid in third grade, who called me an incredible amount of names because I asked him to cross at the crosswalk. Right? The kid would not cross at the crosswalk. Wouldn't cross the crosswalk. Cursed me out one day. All right? And I told him, well, what does your mother think about that? Right? What did the kid do? Boom. He goes home, goes and gets his mother. Right? I can see his mother coming to the school. So, because I'm on the corner. I'm always on the corner so I can sort of see everything around me. And I can see down the street, and here comes this kid, and here comes his mother. All right? And she's walking rather fast. So you all know when someone's walking that fast, all right, that they're not coming there to greet you in a pleasant manner. So I remember the mother coming to me, and she was absolutely angry. Right? She called me an incredible amount of names. Incredible amount. Some I haven't even heard of. She talked about my mother. She talked about my father. And I was a little sort of taken aback by all that. Because I thought she was going to come and say, yes, you're absolutely right, that my son needs to cross at the crossroad. She was not concerned about that whatsoever. Right? So she was incredibly angry at me. Right? She cursed at me and everything. But what I did not do is that I not engage her, yelling back at her, cursing back at her, telling her what I thought. Only thing I did say is that, you know what, as an adult, you should be not yelling at another adult in front of a child. That's the only thing I said to her. Okay? And so she stormed off with her kid. A couple of days later, I saw her again. And she came to apologize to me. Now, she had told me that the reason that she was so upset was that, she had gotten an eviction notice at her apartment. That her gas and electricity was disconnected. And she was going through all of these hardships. So I told her, well, you know what? We can help you in terms of this eviction. We have relationships with lawyers who can help you on that. There are programs out there that help you get your gas and electricity restored. Right? There are programs that help you get food for your family. So what I was trying to do, and as I talked to the principal about this issue, is I said that, you know what, she was angry at me because of asking her son to cross at the crosswalk. But that was not the main issue, right? Her main issue was she was going through all these hardships, and there was not a place for her to ask for help. So my thing was, you know what, there are other parents within this community who are going through some of the same issues. There are other parents who have children in this school who are going through the same issues. What we need to do is we need to develop programs in this school that make this school a part of the community itself. That parents know that they have these issues that are going on at home, that there is a place for them to go into school for help and assistance. And I was telling the principal and some of my other colleagues that if we do these kind of things, I think we can reduce the amount of violence that exists in our community. Because there are so many other people who are going through these severe hardships in their lives. They have nowhere to turn. And sort of the slightest hint that you are trying to tell them what to do, people become very, very enraged and angry. And their only way to deal with the issue is lashing out. So I thought we needed to do that. So, as I want to talk about more in my workshop, is that we need to develop these mechanisms throughout our communities. That yes, these mechanisms can be developed. Yes, these mechanisms are difficult, but I think the rewards are there as well. Now, since 2006, we've had this Peace Force. And it had its ups, it had its downs. I think that there are certain things we could do a lot better than what we're doing. I wish there were more people that we could work with on this. But I think that it's something that can be duplicated across our city, duplicated across our country. Someone was talking today about this movie, The Interrupters, and it's about this group, Ceasefire. Right? Now, Ceasefire has ex-gang members and others who are out there trying to disrupt violence among gang members. Right? And they do a wonderful job of what they do. But what we're talking about is getting ordinary citizens, church members, community members, block club members, as a part of this sort of peace army to help quell violence within the community. And I think that can actually be done. Is it going to be easy to do? No, but it can be done. And one of the ways to do that is to have people who are committed to social action, have people who are committed to the philosophies of nonviolence. And I think that our experiences in working in both of the high school and the elementary school the kind of fights that we had broken up, and the kind of people that we had talked to. We found out a lot from folks. And they grudgingly began to respect us because we were there every day. We were there every day. We were very, very consistent. And I would tell a kid, how are you doing today? And they'll say, go F off. I'm like, thank you very much, and you have a good day. It was always very, very consistent. And it was consistent to the point that it wore them down. It was consistent to the point that it wore them down. Because I would not engage them. I wouldn't like, oh yeah, you piece of crap. No, I wouldn't say anything like that to them. I'm like, hey, have a good day. And I think that this model can be utilized and should be utilized in our society itself. Now, I want to go with one more formal thing, okay? And then I'm going to let you guys go because I know you're tired of listening to me. Okay? But one of the things is when we were talking about the planning for this event, the word sort of the beloved community had come up, all right? And how do you build the beloved community? And Dr. Martin Luther King came up with that sort of statement, the beloved community. But he also talked about the need for the solidarity of the human family itself. And how can the human family have solidarity? And how can we be in solidarity with nature? How can we be in solidarity with each other? And I think that one way that we can do that is have a commitment to nonviolence. But another way that we can do that is to show that commitment by building this sort of peace army itself and getting out there in communities with a presence, and that presence is to prevent violence. So, because unless we do that, you will see on a regular basis in the media, the amounts of violence that goes on in neighborhoods. And a lot of times people say that there's nothing that can be done about it. So when people say that there's nothing that can be done about the violence in the communities, then they say that what we need to have are more draconian measures. We need to lock up more people. We need to have more police. We need to suppress our civil liberties and rights. All in the sake of safety itself. And I argue that safety comes when all of us stand together and say that in unison, right, we will not allow this violence to continue. That we will not allow our children to die. And we will not allow our communities to suffer and deteriorate. That's what's important. And that's the challenge I give to each and every one of you. That's the challenge I give to myself on a day-to-day basis. That's the challenge we must have to our nation. That something must change. That we want to build a beloved community. And the only way that a beloved community will ever be built is just each one of us say that it must happen now. Thank you very much.